I feel like I say this every video these days, but this is Australia's newest car brand. Except this one isn't entirely new. You see, this is the Omoda 9. And if that name sounds familiar, well, there used to be the Chery Omoda 5, which was part of the Chinese brand's SUV lineup. But they have decided to spin off Omoda as its own separate, standalone, more premium brand, and it's going to sit in separate showrooms with the almost as new JQ. So, is this a welcome addition to the Australian market, or is it just another name that's going to get lost in this increasingly crowded landscape? Well, let's take it for a drive and find out. The Omoda 9 is the first model that will be sold in the new Omoda JQ showrooms, with the Chery Omoda 5 becoming the Chery C5 and staying put. The Omoda 9 will be the flagship of the range, a medium-sized SUV that will compete against the likes of the Mazda CX-60, BYD C-Line 6, and even the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV. But in keeping with the more premium image the brand is trying to create, there will be a single high-specification model offered here. The grandly named Virtue Super Hybrid Systems, or SHS, will be priced from $61,990 plus on-road costs. It comes generously equipped with 20-inch alloy wheels, LED headlights and taillights, a power tailgate, a 14-speaker Sony sound system, heated seats and steering wheel, and even an inbuilt fragrance system. If you want more details on the specifications and pricing, make sure you read my in-depth written review at carsguide.com.au. Now let's talk about the design, and it is probably a little awkward because, to be candid, to my eyes at least, this looks a bit like a Cadillac Lyriq. There's a very similar silhouette and a lot of the detailing around the headlights. Obviously, you've got a unique Omoda grille and, obviously there's a very bold Omoda. They really are established in that name. But the overall silhouette, and certainly at the rear, there's a lot of, let's say, similarities or inspiration perhaps taken from the American brand. But I guess that's not a bad thing because this thing costs about half the price of the Cadillac, and frankly, both brands are almost just as new in Australia. So if you like the Cadillac Lyriq but want to save some money, maybe the Omoda 9 is a good choice. That Cadillac theme does carry over into the interior. This huge dash panel that has a pair of 12-inch screens, again, is giving me Lyriq vibes. But I've got to say, overall, from a sort of a design and presentation perspective, I think Omoda has done quite a nice job. Like, it's, okay, yes, there are hints of Cadillac to it, but it also looks like a luxury vehicle. I mean, there's worse cars to compare the Omoda 9 to than something that is over $100,000. So from a design perspective, this certainly doesn't feel like, that value-led offering that Chery is producing. This feels different and, makes sense why they've tried to push it as a standalone brand because, the materials used, the level of design and finish to it does make it feel, a step above. That level of that push-up market does carry over into that more practical sense of the cabin. You've got this large infotainment screen here. It's an app-based system, so it's a fairly intuitive menu to get through, but you have got Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. One thing I would say is it is, strictly speaking, just up here, and the touchscreen is good. It does tend to show the marks a little bit, which is not ideal, so you will need to clean that on a fairly regular basis. The controls are, fairly intuitive. One thing that does bother me, and it's not strictly limited to Omodas, but I've noticed recently in a couple of Chinese-built cars that I've hopped into, I can't quite get the seat low enough for my personal preference. So I'm never 100% comfortable. It's just one of those things that I think it just seems to be a specific thing that the Chinese industry at the moment I can't quite get the seat exactly where I want. But speaking of the seat, one cool thing is these speakers. The headrest has built-in speakers. So obviously you can hear the music better. But for example, if you take a call, there's actually a mode in the sound system. So not everyone can necessarily, and obviously they'll probably still hear it, but you can have the call channeled directly through these speakers rather than play around the entire car and annoy everyone else while you take a work call or chat with your mates. So there are, those little touches of technology and innovation that are pushing Omoda away from that mainstream Chery and more towards a more premium offering. It's worth jumping in the back seat because like I say, this is a slightly larger than average mid-size SUV. So the space back here is pretty good. I'm about 6 foot, just over 180 centimeters tall. There is, because it's got this panoramic sunroof, headroom is slightly compromised. Again, you've also got that sloping roof line, which, dare I say, a little bit Cadillac inspired. But generally speaking, you've got really good leg room, really good foot room. It's actually relatively comfortable. Plus, you've got your own climate control back here and seat heaters, which I probably don't need on a day like today. You've got outlets down here, so you can charge your devices if needs be. So overall, from a practical standpoint, the back seat is not a bad place to be. Now, finally, in terms of practicality, let's take a look at the boot. And on paper, it's 660 litres, which is fairly generous. But in a practical standpoint, it's quite a square floor. It's actually a genuinely fairly square floor space and a nice flat load area. So, from a convenience factor, pretty good. One small convenience factor, though, because you've got the electric motor mounted underneath, you do end up with one of these, a tyre repair kit. That's your spare. There's no temporary space saver or even a full size, obviously. But that's obviously the trade-off. To get the efficiency and to get the space, you're going to have to compromise in some way, shape or form, and that's what it is here. So, but again, from a practical standpoint, I would say overall, Omoda's done a nice job of making a fairly spacious and practical, upper mid-size SUV. Now, don't let the fancy super hybrid name fool you. Under the bonnet, the Omoda 9 is powered by a plug-in hybrid powertrain, the type that are becoming increasingly familiar to Australian drivers. Now, this particular setup does make some impressive figures though. It combines a 1.5 litre turbocharged petrol engine with 3 electric motors, 2 at the front and 1 at the rear, to create quite a potent SUV. Omoda claims the combined output of the super hybrid system is an impressive 395 kilowatts, allowing this family-friendly SUV to sprint from 0 to 100 k's in just 4.9 seconds. And all this performance is sent to all 4 wheels via a 3-speed dedicated hybrid transmission. In terms of efficiency and range, Omoda claims this new model can drive up to 145 kilometers on electric power alone, thanks to its 34 kilowatt hour battery. Fuel economy is officially rated at 1.4 litres per 100 k's, although that relies on utilising the battery to its maximum, and once that is depleted, you can expect to see a much higher figure. Realistically, anything below 4 litres per 100 k's is what you should expect if you do mostly urban driving, which is good for a vehicle of this size. Now, Omoda claims that the Virtue SHS can drive up to 1100 kilometers, but of course that's a theoretical number based on achieving both the full EV-only range and then the 1.4 litres per 100k figure, which isn't really achievable in the real world. So we've looked at all the price, the practicality, the design, the specs, but what does it actually mean when the rubber hits the road? What's the Omoda 9 like to drive? Well, it's fine. Omoda obviously has luxury expectations and aspirations, and therefore the bar is set higher, to be blunt. This really needs to impress, and I think from a driving perspective, there is work to do. The performance is good. 395 kilowatts, that's a lot of punch, arguably more than you need, but a luxury car, to me, should have effortless performance, easy performance, and the Omoda 9 does have that. Where it falls down for me, though, is that ride and handling. It just doesn't suit Australian conditions. The steering feels a little bit too light and vague off center. It doesn't really have, the feedback just isn't great. And then there's the ride it's okay, but it lacks composure. It doesn't have that, magic carpet ride, the comfortable, cruisy kind of ride that you really should expect from a luxury vehicle. And again, though, that comes down to the expectations that Omoda has put on itself. No, this isn't a $100,000 vehicle, so you sort of reset your calibration, but from a purely, that wanting to pitch it as a luxury vehicle, there is work to be done to be, at the cutting edge, at the leading edge of the market. We've seen there's other brands like GWM that are investing heavily in a local ride and handling program. And you see GWM, taking up residency at the Lang Lang Proving Grounds, hiring former Holden chassis engineers to try and localize their car. We've seen other brands do that successfully, like, hire or invest in local experts and expertise that make the, ride and handling better. And I think that's something that, not just Omoda, but lots of these new brands that are hitting the Australian market, they should be doing if they want to make an impact. If they want to be memorable, they need to invest to make these cars more suited to Australian conditions. Now, in terms of safety, this is a bit of it's a soft spot for a lot of brands at the moment, but particularly Chery in the past, there's been some issues. And the brand themselves has admitted that, the rush to include all these safety systems that the safety authorities want to ensure you get, the best possible rating, they simply aren't ready for the real world. A lot of these cars, again, they're hitting the market quite quickly, and they're just not calibrated for the real world. I personally have, expressed my opinion on the Chery Tiggo 4 Pro that I drove, and I didn't like it. But to their credit, Chery, Omoda, JQ, they have admitted that they themselves are not happy, and they are improving. That's one of the things they have invested in, is a local program to improve those systems. I do think this Omoda 9 is better in many respects. I think there are the lane keeping is a noticeable improvement, but I'd also argue that there's still a bit of a ways to go. For example, today there's a couple of times where the car has told me I'm distracted, and then as I look down to it sends up a beep and tells me I'm distracted, and I look down to see what the message says, and the message tells me I'm distracted, and then the car tells me I'm distracted for longer because I'm looking at the same signs that it's warning me of. So it's a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy in that sense. And there was another warning that came up that honestly was so long I couldn't even read it before the car then told me I was distracted. So this is still a work in progress. Certainly there are ways for Omoda to improve. They can get better, but to be frank, there's a lot of car companies you can say that about. So I don't want to be too hard on Omoda for it. I think they at least have acknowledged it and are working on it, but hopefully the systems will just continually improve and become, frankly, less distracting and less overt. But of course, like all these modern cars, you can go into the menu and you can switch it off, although that does somewhat defeat the purpose of having the safety system in the first place. But again, it's just one of those areas where I think there is room for improvement and to really cement Omoda as a premium luxury brand. As for the ownership credentials, Omoda is applying the JQ model, so it will be covered by an 8-year warranty, as well as having 8 years of cap price servicing and 8 years of roadside assistance. Service intervals are every 15,000 kilometres or 12 months, whichever comes first, and across those 8 years, you'll be spending a total of $3,343, which averages out at just over $418 per year, although you will pay different amounts each time. So what's the verdict on this latest newcomer? Is there space for the Omoda 9 in the Australian market? Honestly, it feels like a lot to take on in a short period of time, launching Omoda as a separate brand before Chery is fully cemented in the Australian market, and JQ is incredibly new. It makes selling the Omoda as a genuine alternative to luxury brands and even the likes of Mazda and Volkswagen a tough ask. Judging the Omoda 9 on its merits, it's a nice enough SUV and it does many things well, but it doesn't have any elements that really stand out as separating it from the competition definitively and making it a compelling buy. Now, if you want to know more about the Omoda 9, check out my detailed, in-depth written review at carsguide.com.au.